My name is Perry, and welcome to the Literary Niterary. So in my 2020 book and reading goals video, I talked about how when the new year started, I was really excited to ring in the decade of the 2020s by returning to the decade of the 1920s in literature and reading a book from every year of the 1920s at some point in 2020. I also mentioned in that video that I had not done anything to make any progress towards this goal so far this year, be it making a TBR list or actually reading a book. Nope, haven't touched it. But today, I have shaken off my lassitude and I have compiled a list of 10 books, one from each year of the 1920s, that I am hoping to read this year. I made my TBR. So this is going to be my official TBR for my 10 from the 20s project. I selected a lot of these books more because of their position in literary history than necessarily the individual storyline of the given books. Now, most of them I'm genuinely excited to read and would pick up at some point anyway. I'm just using the project as an impetus to get into them. A lot of them are books from authors that I've read one book by in the past, but I'm hoping to deepen my understanding of that author's work. Some of them are sort of foundational texts in genre fiction, which is exciting. So when I say that I've selected them based on their position in literary history, not based on their content, I don't want you to think that I'm slogging through books I'm not interested in. Okay, there's one that's really intimidating me, but we'll talk about that at the end. However, because I chose a lot of these books based on what they contributed to the literature of the time or what they can do as far as representing certain literary movements of the time, I don't have detailed plot synopses to give you for a lot of them. So that's not the exercise of the video, but I will tell you what I do know and why I selected them. I don't think I've done a perfect job of collecting something representative of everything that was happening in literature at the time, but I do think I've done a decent job of gathering a reasonably diverse list. So without further ado, let's get into the books. My pick for the year 1920 is The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. This is her first published book and her first Poirot novel. I think the only book I've ever read by Agatha Christie is And Then There Were None, and I mean, obviously I loved it, but I don't think I've even read Murder on the Orient Express. Like, I think that's the only Christie I've ever read. So this felt like as good a place to start as any. My pick for 1921 is Alice Adams by Booth Tarkington. I previously read two books by Booth Tarkington, The Turmoil and The Magnificent Ambersons, which are the first two books in his Growth trilogy. I read them because I did a short-lived Pulitzer project where I was reading books that had read the early Pulitzer Prize for novels, and The Magnificent Ambersons was one of them. A lot of people say that his two most famous and well-loved works are The Magnificent Ambersons and Alice Adams, and since I enjoyed both of the books that I'd read from him previously, I thought I'd give Alice Adams a shot. My pick for 1922 is The Beautiful and the Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This almost goes without saying. I've read The Great Gatsby. I love The Great Gatsby. I've read a few other incidental things by Fitzgerald, but I haven't read any of his other novels, so this felt, I mean, like, you can't make a 1920s reading list without F. Scott Fitzgerald. Like, he's just become so iconic and representative of the zeitgeist. So that's my 1922 pick. For 1923, I have picked The Inimitable Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse. This is not the first Jeeves material ever published, chronologically speaking, but it is where a lot of people recommend that you begin, and I believe it's the first, like, short story collection. This is sort of the beginning of a long series of humorous and adorable romps that I'm pretty excited to get into. My pick for 1924 is We by Yevgeny Zamyatin. Apologies for that pronunciation. This is a foundational work of dystopian fiction that I've had on my TBR since reading Brave New World a few years ago. My pick for 1925 is Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Again, sort of like F. Scott Fitzgerald, I wasn't just gonna not put a Virginia Woolf on this list. This isn't the Virginia Woolf that I would say I'm most interested in. If I were just gonna pick randomly, I probably would have picked Orlando or The Waves as a place to start, but it is maybe her most famous or beloved novel, and it's a modernist stream of consciousness novel that I believe is set over the course of one afternoon. My pick for 1926 is The Weary Blues by Langston Hughes, which is a book of poetry. This is a major text of the Harlem Renaissance, so I'm expecting treatment of race in America alongside, based on my experience with Hughes's poetry in general, just beautiful use of sound. My pick for 1927 is The Bridge of San Luis Rey by Thornton Wilder. Thornton Wilder is an extremely well-known, popular, classic playwright. He's written one of my favorite plays, The Skin of Our Teeth, and also Our Town, which is much more famous. But anyway, this is his only novel, and having loved his other work for so long, I definitely was looking for an excuse to read this. My pick for 1928 is Quicksand by Nella Larsen, which I believe is a novel about a biracial woman trying to find her place in the world. And, okay, my pick for 1929 is A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway. So I almost exclusively focused on British literature over the course of my English degree. So somehow between high school and college, I managed to more or less entirely skip out on like a lot of classic American novels. So I've barely read Hemingway, I've barely read Faulkner, I've barely read Steinbeck. Classics of American literature are usually not my favorite, and I will be upfront and admit that I am intimidated by this book. I'm afraid of this. I don't know why I'm afraid. There's nothing this book can do to me. The worst thing that's going to happen is I'm going to read it and not like it. In which case there are other books that were published in 1929 that I could substitute in. But I did want to challenge myself to at least taste test a Hemingway or a Faulkner at some point in this project, because part of the point of this project is, as well as sort of celebrating the 1920s theme in general, to cover a gap in my reading and my knowledge of literary history. So that's what I'll be attempting to do with this. Send me all your good vibes, because I'm afraid. And if it's like December and I still haven't read this, you need to yell at me, okay? Okay. So yeah, that was just a quick little TBR for my 10 for the 20s reading project that I will be carrying out over the course of the rest of 2020. If you have any 1920s reads, whether they are classics from the 1920s or books set in the 20s, I would love your recommendations or discussion of those in the comments down below. Let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them, or what you think I will think of them. So yeah, not saying these are the only books from the 1920s that I'm ever going to read, just that this is my sort of introductory course that I've set for myself to celebrate the beginning of a new decade. I feel like I should think of something clever and jazzy to say, but I can't, so I mean, maybe I'll just call you all old sport or something, but in the meantime, while I think of something clever, I hope you are all staying happy, healthy, and safe, and I hope that somewhere there is a great book waiting just for you. Bye!